Is China a living hell? Well, if you ask any Chinese person in China, they will tell you no, because it's all relative. But is living like cloudy with a chance of meatballs, but instead of food, it's actually your ceiling falling, a great experience? Is living in a tofu-dry construction building a desirable outcome? It's constantly getting scammed from things like fusion meat, fake gold, fake wood-carrying girls, fake homeless people. Or restaurants where the chef is peeing in the kitchen. Is that a great way to live? Or how about a domestically made electric car that doesn't deploy the airbag like this BYD car?
气囊没弹啊？只弹了气帘儿。好家伙了！顺便再看看它的做工用料，已经锈了，看到没有？已经锈了。我的天哪！你看这儿也是，已经锈了。
The point is, China, until you look at the fine details, you will see that it's a flawless country. China seems all right, and that's precisely what the government tried to do. And the Chinese people simply have to live with it. So what actually makes China bad, and how is it that I'm trying to say the same thing over and over again? Well, for one, there's no accountability. The wrongdoings of the governments, the people simply just have to live with it, because there's no inalienable and no God-given rights in China or under the CCP. There's no people's representatives. There's no presidential elections every 4 years. There's no correction to the wrongdoings and course correcting halfway through the game. So simply things are just straight up bad until it goes completely wrong. Videos like this where the child films on camera for his grandparents who have been harassed by a local village head for 2 years, bullied. Another child who reported for his grandparents' only house to be demolished, and they've been beaten by the township secretary and others. They promised the grandparents that they would build them a new one after demolishing the old one. And after that was done, well, they simply forgot what they said, and the promise was never kept, leaving those grandparents homeless for about 10 years. These cases, you'll find them in any country, but on a broad scale, there's no problem-solving situations involved, where the cops are in bed with the government officials. They serve the government. Or they're too busy filming, faking, helping the locals. And the thing is, growing up in China sucks. This is 611.icu. It's a new campaign started online so Chinese parents and kids can go on to sign their schools up in one of these entries. So far, at the time of recording, there's about 1,700 plus schools in China, middle and high schools. What's happening is there's a 6-11 schedule for kids in China. They study from 6 a.m. till 11 p.m. at night, 6 to 7 days a week. Now, if you look at some of the entries, that averages to about 100 plus hours a week of studying. So this extreme level of torture, trying to get them to become test machines, has been driving a lot of kids into mental problems, depression, just in general, this hyper-competitiveness in China.
日本人是好人还是坏人？
And this video, which I just did a short video on, this is a dad asking his daughter if Japanese people are bad. And the daughter says they're good. And so the dad does what? Pow pow. And then forces the daughter to admit that the Japanese are bad people.
现在跟你说日本人是坏人，是好人还是坏人？现在说。
是坏人，我说了是坏人，就是下是坏人。
between having to fight for the social rights of your grandparents to getting brutally pressured by your parents into studying to not having a great outcome when you do graduate from college, which, by the way, usually is 4 years of not doing much, because once you get into college, your study career is practically over, and now it's really up to chance and life. The, the experience of an average Chinese person is not quite good. But the government will want you to forget about these people's experience. Especially this one next, which I found was very bizarre. This woman was filmed consuming rotten and moldy food. She collects rainwater for drinking, and the moon is her light source at night. The vlogger helps her to get some real food, and she says her husband passed away 5 to 6 years ago. Her belly bloating, some believe, is hepatic ascites, which is the accumulation of fluids in the stomach cavity because of liver damage. The reason the CCP doesn't want these videos to spread around is because they don't help with the narrative that China's succeeding. China is beating the world. You got DeepSeek, right? You got a new blockbuster movie called Ne 2. You got all of these success in the mainstream that they want not to be overshadowed by the biggest problems in China, which is the fact that this success was built on half of the country being left behind while the other half succeeded. So the CCP uses this excuse for why the other half is left behind is that things like homelessness, for example, is a complex problem. Well, it is complex because these are deep-rooted in the ways that they handle things, but it's also because it's a complex hardship created by varieties of different problems, but fundamentally it really boils down to how the CCP views people. Because they view people as disposable, there's really no sense of mercy or regret when it comes to handling the population that they want to silence, right? What they call is the low-end population. For example, homelessness. Homelessness is in China. It's real, and it happens, yes, of course, around the world in every different country. But in China, they pretend like homeless is not an issue until it happens, like in this video where you see people on the streets of Shenzhen putting up blankets, sleeping on the streets, and then they tell you the excuse, right? It's a complex problem. And honestly, because China is actually a rotten country, and until you look for it, things appear pretty normal. And homelessness is one of the simpler ones that you can kind of pinpoint right away that they usually try to lie about. There's more hidden ones where unless you lived in China for a few years, you probably wouldn't even get to touch in terms of reaching that side of China. One of them is the way that they're saying how, well, the CCP lifted people out of poverty, right? The people all have jobs now. The people living in the urban area can get a house, can work a 9 to 5. What a lot of people end up having to do in China is that they work in factories.
现在不用你上班了，体力劳动不用这个字儿，
他不用我上班，
不用你上班了，给你结工资，
他那个理由不充足，
够充足了，就这么简单。我觉得你不适应这个岗位。
In this video, which was taken on February 1st, a man said that he worked in a factory and wanted to take a day off on the 4th day of the Chinese New Year. Instead of granting that day off, he was laid off right away on the spot. The staff member said your leave request could not be approved and that they thought he wasn't suitable for the job anymore, so they fired him. Forced to resign, it tells him you can either resign or call the police. He, of course, replied, isn't there a labor law in place to protect him from all of this stuff? Well, laws really don't apply to everybody in China. And afterwards, he even received a phone call from the local police asking whether or not he posted a video on TikTok or Douyin in China. And so, as you can see here, the police really do not side with the people. And this man here is protesting 12-hour work days during in his factory. And he later, of course, had his profile deleted and the video was taken down as well. A new friend that I had recently met, and by the way, I'll have a video coming out with him, said something which actually greatly summarizes the state of China. He went to China and he says that if you're somebody who wants to live like a sheep, just fall in line and do what you're told, China's a great country because you have great infrastructure and every day, wherever you go, you can have a peaceful, enjoyable life. But if you're somebody who even desires a slimmer of freedom, or just desires to question things, well, China's not for you because once you step out of line a little bit, you get eaten right away. And that's precisely what happens with ordinary people. They have to live with it because unless they deal with what they're being, I guess the cards are dealt, or just a situation there, although unfair, once they try to do something about it, that's when the system starts to eat you up again. So there's no way that they can get out of it by protesting or by attempting to voice their opposition, their opinion. So let's talk about the second point here while we're talking about the factory stuff, which is that the apparent success equals personal success. What does that mean? Well, the CCP likes to think that As long as they have done something as a country, well, it also means that you have personally gotten better, right? So you often hear this with online trolls from the CCP. What they say is that, well, China is no longer the China from 30 years ago. China is more advanced today. And that means every Chinese person in China is more prosperous and better off than they were 40 years ago. Well, the truth is, individuals are living a different experience. And a lot of times they're using that 1% success to justify the rest of the 99.9% of failure. This is, some people may be thinking, well, in the U.S., if you got billionaires, that means everybody else must be successful too, right? But no, the billionaires are billionaires, and if you're still making $20,000 a year, you're still making $20,000 a year. But you would never think that because Elon Musk has billions of dollars, that you are better off today than you were yesterday when he had few millions less, right? That doesn't work like that. But the way they propagandize things is that if somebody in China is successful, that means we're all successful, right? Sure, you got a plenty bits of population in the urban cities, especially the biggest cities, that are doing quite well, but that's in every country. But what happens is half of the country, at least half of the country in China, is still living in a poverty state. They don't have the proper healthcare systems. They don't have the proper income. And a lot of them are being exploited even today, which is ironic considering that Karl Marx talked about this whole factory exploitation thing in his book, right? That's the whole point of communism, is that they don't want to be exploited. That's the whole point of this communism talk, right? Is they don't want to be exploited by the capitalists in the factory. In this video, though, rural workers are traveling to Shanghai at 3 a.m. in the morning looking for jobs. These are day paid jobs. They work, they get signed up, paid for the day. If they can find any, that is. Many of them don't.
安全的安全帽，人手一把铁锹就站在那里。我有些好奇地上去询问，原来他们是干灵活的工人。
我从来没看到过那么多人，
都是吃不上饭的，都来叫饭的。你看，要吃上饭了，一大早谁来这里干嘛？
那一般你比如说一个礼拜大概能找到几天啊？
一般来说，有时候干个4、5天，
嗯
3、4天。
那一天能够赚多少钱？比如说100-200、200-300，就大概。
哪里有这么多呀？没有。
听旁边的大哥说，接近年关，好多人都回家了。放在之前，这里的人要比现在多上几倍。
And this female worker in a video in the factory looks very tired, just trying to get her lunch. And the video sparked massive amount of discussions online. People saying things like, oh my God, the female employee looks like a zombie. Look at this woman in the video, a body whose soul was sucked by the assembly line. The factory is the most exploitative, and workers are like machines. They keep working, counting commissions, and fighting for speed. It's broken. China's the world's factory. A lot of people are literally living through that exploitation that they so very much talked about in the book by Karl Marx. And the fact that this is still happening tells you that no matter what happens to the 1% successful in China, or the people who made DeepSeek, right? They're successful. It doesn't mean that they're personally successful on this end of the country. Because most tourists and people that visit China stay less than 2 weeks, and people that live there for 1 or 2 years, they don't really get to experience this. And so it's very hard for people to say, other than the fact that, but my beautiful city in China, Shanghai, blah, 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 blah. That's how they see, and which is fine. That's why I never tell you don't go visit China. But if you do visit, just know that you're not going to see the full picture until you've lived there for many years. The thing is, behind the beautiful cities, the skylines, the trains, and the bridges, how long does it take for you to hide behind the packaging until one day it doesn't work anymore? This picture posted online sparked a discussion about the state of China. It's an apple that looks perfectly fine on the outside but rotten on the inside. It's been released for 76 days. Why are there so many bugs and they rot so quickly? Now, 76 is the number of years the CCP has been in power since 1949. This comment says, why do I have to eat the rotten part? This apple has been 5,000 years, right? Meaning the civilization history of China, only been 70 plus days and so many insects. Again, the year the CCP has been in power. I smell the pesticide, but the seller tells me it's pesticide free. Before cutting it, it seems perfect until the rotten part shows on the surface. You're starting to hide that too. This one says, inside is rotten. They start to color the outside too. Apple is rotten inside, but the outside is fine, so most of us don't realize it until it starts to rot on the outside too. Then we realize it's time to throw it. And this one says, some say just cut the part that's rotten, but really the whole thing is bad. So many people are starting to realize that fundamentally it's the system that the CCP created that's really wrong. And in order to solve all of their problems, they need a new system, which is why you see less and less foreigners in China. More and more Chinese people want to escape China because China is a rotten country and people want to get out of it. They have to deal with the complex hardship in the process. But most people understand today, which I think is a good thing, that this is a very deeply rooted problem, and people are starting to reject this whole idea that China is prosperous, especially the Chinese people that really have lived through the worst of the worst experiences. All right, thanks for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment below your thoughts on this topic, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching China Insider. We'll see you next time.